I've got to make, again, another adjustment to the syllabus. My wife had cancer 3 or 4 years ago. She's in remission, everything's fine. But she's got some tests coming up on Wednesday that happens to fall right during class that she wants me to be at. So we're not going to have class on Wednesday. So what that means is the poems that we have left to do, we're going to cover today. Partly what that means is we're not going to talk about all of them. What we will talk about are, I think we'll have time, are The Caller, Dover Beach, Dulce et Decorum Est, and That Time of Year Thou Mayst in Me Behold. So that means there are only, the ones that we won't discuss are the handout that I just gave, okay, the Dover Bitch, which is a parody of Dover Beach, and I might make reference to it as we talk about Dover Beach. Charge of the Light Brigade, which is on page 965. And then the one by Shakespeare that I added, today's Monday, on Friday, When 40 Winters Shall Besiege Thy Brow. The only way those would show up on the exam anyways, 99% sure, would be name the author. You know, you'll get the title, name the author, kind of a thing. So if you just work on that, you shouldn't have a problem. And because we won't be here, I won't be able to discuss the final, but the final will look like the previous exams. I mean, exact same format. The actual part you will be tested on for the final is just the poetry section. So all the terms that I said in the book to focus on, even though we did not go over all those terms in terms of quizzes, we talked about quite a few of them, but all those terms that I said to know from the book, and then the poems that we discussed, okay? Extra credit will go back to the beginning of the semester. And the extra credit, I think I said the other day, will be worth 30 to 50 points. So if you haven't done well, or you know, you're hoping to bump your grade up a little bit, go back over those previous exams, quizzes, notes, and hopefully you can get a bunch of extra to bump up your final average. Okay, we're going to start with The Caller on page 1352. This is a poem by George Herbert. Herbert was a contemporary of Donne's, a little bit younger than John Donne. Born in the very late 16th century, died in the early 17th century, died a couple of years after Donne. He was an Anglican priest, like Donne became. And Herbert wrote a book of poetry called The Temple. All of Herbert's poetry was religious, or what's called devotional poetry. Okay, it's all directed either to God or to the soul's devotion for God, that kind of a thing. Okay, so here we have a poem titled "The Caller," and notice it's Collar. Okay. Could also be Caller. I struck the board and cried, no more, I will abroad. That's not how that's supposed to be read. I struck the board means literally smacked the table and cried, no more, I will abroad. Put that in everyday language, because every one of you has done essentially this same thing. But you didn't say, you know, I struck the board and cried, no more, I will abroad. You probably used 2 words. 2. And then 3 words. That's it. I'm out of here. That's what he's saying. I'm done with, we don't know yet what the speaker is done with. That comes later. What? Shall I ever sigh and pine? Pine means complain. Sigh, exactly what it... So, my lines in life are free, free as the road, loose as the wind, as large as store. Okay? Lines in life. Lines, like mooring lines for a ship. Tie down lines for an air balloon. What does he mean? I don't have any. This speaker, in other words, is not like the speaker in Frost's Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening. He does not have promises to keep. Okay? So, shall I be still in suit? Your gloss tells you that means serving another. So, if the speaker is asking, shall I be still in suit? What's he really saying? Why don't I serve myself? Why am I always serving somebody else? Have I no harvest but a thorn to let me blood, and not restore what I have lost with cordial fruit? Okay? Have I no harvest but something that makes me bleed? And can I restore what I've lost with restorative fruit, like a drink that helps one feel better? Not necessarily alcohol, like medicinal drink. Okay? Sure, there was wine before my sighs did dry it. And he's using the Petrarchan image of, the lover's sighs, drowning the world, etc., etc. Okay? There was scorn before my tears did drown it. Is the year only lost to me? Now we get an idea of what the speaker is implying with no more I will abroad. No more what? I've spent a year doing something. We don't know what yet. Is the year only lost to me? Have I no bays to crown it? Your gloss tells you the bays are triumphal wreaths. They're laurel bays, the laurel crown that in ancient Greece and Rome would be given to the victor. So, he's saying, what do I have to show for this last year? Whatever that year was. No flowers, no garlands, all blasted, that is, wasted. Not so, my heart. That is, I've not wasted the last year. Whatever the speaker was doing in the last year. It's not been a waste. There is fruit, and thou hast hands. There is fruit, and thou hast hands. Implies? What's the speaker saying? What do you do with low-hanging fruit? Pluck it. Take it. Okay? You got an apple tree, you got a cherry tree, you got a plum tree, you got an orange tree, whatever. If the fruit is ripe or the fruit is right, take it. What's that an image of? He's a priest, remember. Bingo. It's the garden. You can eat all the fruit of the trees in the garden, but two. You can't touch this one or this one. Okay? So, there is fruit. In other words, damn, that looks good. And, well, looky there. I'm not crippled. I do have hands. Recover all thy sigh-blown age on double pleasures. Why double pleasures? What's the speaker telling us the speaker has done over the last year? If he's saying recover all thy sigh-blown age on double pleasures, if he has to recover, then what's he done? How? What's he lost? Pleasure. In that last year. The speaker has intentionally said, can't look at that fruit. Bad fruits. So now the speaker is saying what? Not only am I going to pluck from that tree, but I'm going to pluck from that tree, and that tree, and that tree, and that tree. It's like when you hear stories of somebody who's been told you've got 6 months to live. And what do? Suddenly become all religious and spiritual, go climb a mountain, get to be one with God? Sometimes. And the other times? Live it up, man. Go out partying, okay? And usually the way we hear about those kinds of stories is somebody gets a diagnosis, you've got 3 months to live. Happened just about 2 years ago. Some guy in Australia goes to his doctor, does some tests, comes back, doctor calls him, test telling you, you've got terminal cancer, you've got 3 months. Guy goes, all right. And he accepts every credit card offer he gets in the mail. And he gets like 20. And he goes off and he does a round the world trip and racks up like $200,000 in debt. Only to get back from the trip and find out, oops, the lab messed up. You're not the one with terminal cancer. And he's not like, what the? Because he's now got 200 grand in debts.
That's terminal cancer right there.
So he sues the doctor, he sues the lab, So that's recovering double pleasures. Forsake thy cage. What cage? Well, the speaker's going to tell us. Thy rope of sands. What's the difference between a cage and a rope of sand? First of all, cage is pretty clear, right? The sand to make a good rope? No. If you've ever been to the beach with someone and you did the stupid thing where you buried someone in sand, unless you dug the hole vertically like this and they stood down in it and you bury them to their shoulders, then it's hard to get out. But if they're lying flat and you cover them with sand, what do? You get up. The sand doesn't hold you down. Forsake thy cage, thy rope of sands, which petty thoughts have made. What kind of thoughts are petty? What kind of cash is petty? Like petty cash, a petty cash drawer. It's small. It's little. It's not where you keep the $100 bills. It's where you keep ones and change. So petty thoughts are small thoughts, little thoughts. Thy rope of sands, which petty thoughts have made. Notice, the thoughts have made the rope of sand. Now, we've already talked, rope of sand it's not binding really, right? And made to thee, that is, the petty thoughts have made to thee the rope of sand into good cable. Now, he doesn't mean cable like we think of cable, like telephone line cable. Woven, twisted wire. Cable here means the kind of rope that is used in the early 17th century on a sailing vessel for things like the anchor, and mooring lines. Now, some of these ropes are as thin as like that. Notice, that's like 5 inches, 6 inches. That's not very thin rope, right? I'm talking the diameter of the rope. Or as thick as like 18 inches. Okay? That's cable. That's not going to break. So what do his petty thoughts do? They take the rope of sands that he makes and turns that into good cable. To do what? To enforce and draw and be thy law. So what becomes his, whoever the speaker is, law? His petty thoughts. That's what he follows. while what? Thou didst wink and wouldst not see. Wink and wouldst not see what? Wink doesn't just mean, that. Wink means close your eyes to. And wouldst not see what? There's that fruit over there. Now I can't look at it. Why? Temptation. What says temptation? The petty thoughts. The petty thoughts say, away! That is, I'm done. I'm done with those petty thoughts. I'm going to go get those fruits. Call in thy death's head there. What's he mean by death's head? What's the whole purpose of Hamlet and Horatio talking with the gravediggers in scene 1 of Act 5? It's so that the gravedigger keeps throwing up bones. And there's skull after skull after skull. So that Hamlet can kind of rhapsodize on, could this have been Alexander? This was, and he sees a skull that he knew. This was Yorick. They become what's called a memento mori. Reminder of death. Remember in the scene, Hamlet, the end of Act 4, it's in Act 5, Hamlet's getting ready to go and have his little jousting match with, fencing match with Laertes. And he and Horatio are talking. And Horatio says, you shouldn't go, because Hamlet says, something tells me something's funny here. And Horatio says, listen to your gut. And Hamlet says, nah. Why? If I'm not supposed to die now, I'll die later. If I'm not supposed to die later, I'll die now. Doesn't matter. Why? We all gotta die. Horatio's like, well, yeah, that's true. And then Hamlet says, it's just about the shortest, pithiest line of the entire play. The readiness is all. What's he mean? You gotta be ready to die. When? Every minute. You gotta be ready. Call in thy death's head there. Put away the skull. Because what's the purpose of the skull? It's to remind you have to die. The Old English epic poem Beowulf. After Beowulf kills Grendel and Grendel's mother, the king that he kills them for gives this big long speech. It's called Hrothgar's homily usually. And he essentially says, you gotta die. Yeah, you're young, you're strong now, you're powerful now. You got the strength of 30 men in each hand grip. God favors you now, but guess what? You're going to wake up one morning and you're going to be old and gray and toothless, and you're not going to have any power, and you will have to die. Call in thy death's head there. Tie up thy fears. Fears of what? Fears of dying? What else? I can't go pluck that fruit. Why? I'll get caught. I can't steal that thing in that store. Why? I'll get caught. I can't speed. Why? Those are all somewhat rational fears, but they can also be irrational fears. After all, how often do you really see a cop on the interstate? So it's okay to do 100 between here and Nashville. It's a lot easier to do 100 out on Interstate 40 when you're in the middle of Oklahoma or the Texas, done it many times, Texas Panhandle, Arizona, New Mexico, Southern California. I mean, you can pretty much set your car in cruise control and close your eyes for a half an hour. It's straight road, okay? Tie up thy fears. He that forbears to suit and serve his need. He that forbears doesn't do what? Suit and serve his need. He that doesn't take what he wants or needs deserves his load. Okay? If you don't take what you want out of life, then what? You deserve what you get out of life. Okay? This is why, the idea being expressed here is why it's, and I'd be included here, would say, if you don't vote, you don't have a right to complain about who gets elected. That's part of how you suit your need. You do your little, because there were elections this time around that got down to like within hundreds. In fact, I just read a thing the other day. There's an election that still hasn't been called in California. I think it's in California. 1 vote difference. 1 vote in a congressional district. Imagine being the one person who thought of voting and said, what the heck, that doesn't make a difference. And then the bad guy, is the one to get elected. So, but as I raved and grew more fierce and wild, at every word, methought I heard one calling, bringing the James Earl Jones voice, child. And I replied, my Lord. So what's the caller? Is it a caller like a dog collar? Heel. He's raving like a dog getting away from you. And what do? You jerk that chain. And the dog goes, my Lord. Is it that kind of collar? Is it a clerical collar? Like a priest wears? And the priest is kind of getting a little antsy? And he wants to go out and have some fun? Sorry, God. Kind of interesting poem when you think about it. Okay, go from there to, we're going to skip Dover Beach for a moment and Dolce at Decorum Guest and go to the one that's closest to it, 1366. Shakespeare is that time of year thou mayst in me behold. A sonnet. This is one of the sonnets addressed to the golden-haired youth that I talked about. So, Shakespeare, in this sonnet, in the 3 quatrains, gives us 3 different images. What are the images of? That time of year thou mayst in me behold, when yellow leaves are none or few, to hang upon those boughs which shake against the cold, bare ruined choirs, where late the sweet birds sang. What's the image? Fourth word. Well, the first phrase. That time of year. What time of year is it? Fall. It's fall. It's late fall. Most of the leaves are gone. Okay? When yellow leaves or none do hang upon those boughs which shake against the cold. Notice, the boughs are bare, ruined choirs where late sweet birds sang. Okay? We think of choir as the group of people doing the singing. In England, the choir is where the singers sit or stand. In an English church, you have like the altar here, and then you have the choir here and here. And this is where they stand. Okay? So the choir are the branches on the trees. The birds have checked out for winter. Second image. In me thou seest the twilight of such day as after sunset fadeth in the west, which by and by black night doth take away, death's second self that seals up all in rest. All right? So what's this image? First one was end of the year. Now we get the end of what?
Light.
No.
Day.
Day. You see the twilight of such day as what? After sunset fades in the west. That is, the sun has gone down. It didn't just go over the horizon where you still have that orange glow. The sun's gone down. So what's the color? It's not quite pitch black. Okay? Which by and by, black night doth take away. Notice, black night, like in Donne's sonnet that we talked about the other day, death's second self. It's an image of death. Okay? That seals up all unrest. Why? Because most people go to sleep at night. So, third image. So the first one was of the year. The second one is the end of a year, end of a day is the second one. Now it's this one. In me thou seest the glowing of such fire, that on the ashes of his youth doth lie. As the deathbed whereon it must expire, consumed with that which it was nourished by. It's the death of a fire. Have you ever been to a bonfire where you started the bonfire, you camped or slept, and woke up the next morning? What happens to the bonfire? It dies to ashes. Can you go stick your hand in there? Don't do that. No, because it's red hot just underneath the ashes. So, in me you see the glowing of such fire that on the ashes of his youth doth lie. So how glowing is this fire? Well, when you see the ash pile from a bonfire, the morning after the bonfire, is it glowing? No. What do you have to do? You got to stir up those ashes in order to see the glowing embers. What's the speaker saying about himself? I'm dying, Fred. That's the image. The speaker is getting ready to leave. Whether through death or something else. But then Shakespeare turns that with the final couplet. Okay? This thou perceivest. That is, you perceive what I'm getting at. Which makes thy love more strong. To love that well, which thou must leave ere long. Who's doing the leaving? It's not the speaker. It's the person being addressed. Okay? That's how Shakespeare kind of turns it around. The first three images imply that the speaker is the one going somewhere. But then we're told, no, you perceive these things, and that makes your love even stronger. Why? To love that well which thou must leave. And some suggest that the word there isn't leave, it should be lose, which thou must lose ere long. Well, that would be in keeping with the first three quatrains. There's a principle in textual editing called lectio difficilior, which means the more difficult reading. The more difficult reading is usually the original poets. The easier reading is usually somebody who didn't understand the more difficult reading, and they simplified it. Okay? Which thou must leave ere long. Well, that's quite a bit more difficult than which thou must lose ere long. Okay. Go from there to 8. Yeah, I think we'll be able to do this. 846. This here. Matthew Arnold's Dover Beach. Written in 1867. Which is 8 years after Darwin publishes The Origin of Species. Why is that significant? Because Darwin's Origin of Species was kind of like a hammer blow to the more or less, still at that time in Victorian England, dominant Christian perspective or view of the world. Okay? Humans made by God, etc. Darwin, nope. Humans descended from apes, etc. So, the sea is calm tonight. The tide is full, the moon lies fair upon the straits. On the French coast the light gleams and is gone. The cliffs of England stand glimmering and vast, out in the tranquil bay. If you've never been to Dover, if you ever have an opportunity to go to England, go to Dover. It's only about an hour, 15-minute train ride out of London, but you can go to Dover, you can go up to the cliffs of Dover, and if it's a clear day, you can look across the English Channel and see the coast of France. Okay? The speaker is doing this at night. That's why he talks about the lights twinkling in the bay. So, cliffs of England stand, glimmering and vast, out in the tranquil bay. Come to the window, sweet is the night air. Well, come to the window tells us what? He's in a home or a place. What else? Possibly. What else? Come means what? There's somebody there. Somebody's being addressed. So, come here. Look out the window with me. Sweet is the night air. Only from the long line of spray where the sea meets the moon-blanched land. Listen. You hear that? You hear the grating roar of pebbles which the waves draw back and fling at their return up the high strand. And the next line, by the sound, emphasizes the sound of the surf. Coming in, going out, coming in, going out. Here, you hear the grating roar of pebbles which the waves draw back and fling at their return up the high strand. Begin and cease and then again begin. And he does that through the use of that internal rhyme, in. Begin, again, again. With tremulous cadence slow, and bring the eternal note of sadness in. I don't know about you. When I go to the beach, I was born and raised in California. We go to Santa Cruz, 3 or 4 times a summer. My wife was born and raised in Jacksonville. She and her sister were at the beach every day. Okay? I don't think I've ever been at the beach and listened to the sound of the ocean coming in, and going back out, and be full of sadness. But this speaker is. And it's not just sadness. It's the eternal note of sadness. If it's eternal, that means what? It's never ending. And if it's an eternal, a never-ending note of sadness, where does joy, where does happiness fill in? Sophocles, whom you've read, long ago heard it on the Aegean, and it brought into his mind the turbid ebb and flow of human, what? Misery. How did Oedipus end? The very last line. Count no man happy until he is dead, free of pain at last. That's the eternal note of sadness. Okay? We find also in the sound a thought, hearing it by this distant northern sea. What's the sound again? The notice, it's never ending. It's always there. So he says, that's the sound Sophocles heard down there in Greece. We hear the same sound. We get a different idea than Sophocles got. The sea of faith was once two at the full, and round earth's shore lay like the folds of a bright girdle furled. The sea of faith. What kind of faith? Notice, it's capitalized. He's not saying solely Christian belief. It is any religious belief. Christian, Jewish, Muslim, whatever. It did once what? It encompassed the world. But now, I only hear its melancholy, long withdrawing roar, retreating to the breath of the night wind, down the vast edges drear and naked shingles, that's pebble beaches of the world. Have you ever been to a really rocky beach? And when the tide is going out, what's the sound you hear? It's very different from the ocean on sand. Because what happens? That rock moves. It comes in and it comes out. It's grating. Whereas the ocean on sand, it's not silent because of the sound the water makes, but it doesn't have that kind of sound. So notice, that's the sound produced by what? The sea of faith retreating. Why is it retreating? Well, the Age of Enlightenment, which began around 1700, which essentially said and promoted the idea that human reason can solve all the problems of the world. And then Darwin came along and he said, guess what? We don't descend from God, we descend from apes. And apes descend from other things. And ultimately, we all descend from slime. Okay? Take the whole religious picture and remove it. Oh, love. Let us be true. The love, that's the person he's addressing. So the speaker is addressing somebody that the speaker loves. Let us be true to one another. What does true mean? Faithful. I won't cheat on you. Don't you cheat on me. For the world which seems to lie before us like a... Where did somebody go? Stop. The world which seems to lie before us like a land of dreams. Notice, seems and like tells us what? It's not. If something is like something, that means it isn't that something. It's similar, but it isn't it. You know. Kangaroo tastes like chicken, but it's not chicken. That's the big difference. It's not the same. Okay? Yeah, exactly. It's kangaroo. So the world we're sold, which seems to lie before us like dreams. What do we think of when we hear the word dreams? You know, the American dream, so to speak. Those are the good experiences you have while you're sleeping, right? Because what do we call the other things? Nightmares. Okay? So various, so beautiful, so new. All these describe the world. Think of Hopkins's Pie to Beauty. Okay? The world hath really neither joy, so there is no joy in the world, nor peace, nor help for pain. One of my favorite lines from one of my favorite films of all times. Life is pain, Highness, Princess Bride. Nor certitude, that is, you can't be sure of anything. Nor peace. Sorry, I skipped some. Life has neither joy, nor love, nor light, nor certitude, nor peace, nor help for pain. So if it doesn't have any of those, what does it have? And we are here as on a darkling plain, swept with confused alarms of struggle and flight. What are the confused alarms of struggle and flight? What are the ignorant armies that clash by night? Those are the armies of faith. This religious perspective arguing against this religious perspective. Can also be politics. Democrats, Republicans. Liberals, conservatives. Progressives, regressives, etc. They're ignorant. Why? Because there is no certitude here. They say there is certitude. I believe because the Bible says, I believe because the Quran says, I believe because Trump says, I believe because Bernie says. But here, the speaker says what? There is really no joy, no love, no light, no certitude, no peace, and no help for pain. And yet, the speaker began that stanza by saying what? Let's be true to one another, and called the other person love. Now, I don't know about you, but if I'm the other person, and you call me love, and then you say all that kind of stuff, my first reaction is going to be the single finger salute, Because you called me love, but you said there is no such thing as love. Why go on if this is your perspective? I mean, this is pretty bleak. This is really bleak. Which is why Anthony Hecht writes this parody. Okay? We don't have time, but real quickly. So there stood Matthew Arnold and this girl with the cliffs of England crumbling away behind them. Remember, he said, the cliffs of England stand glimmering and vast. Yeah, but they are crumbling. Okay? And he said to her, try to be true to me, and I'll do the same for you, for things are bad all over, etc., etc. You try to be faithful to me, and I'll try to be faithful. How's that for wedding vows? Yeah, I love you for now, but I might love her later, or him later, whatever. Well, I knew this girl. Yeah, she'd read Sophocles, good translation. She caught the bitter illusion. But all the time he was talking about all that, she was thinking, man, what would his whiskers feel like on the back of my neck? In other words, I want to have sex. Here I am, I'm down here at this hotel, we're looking at, overlooking the beach, and to have been brought all the way down from London, and then be addressed as a sort of mournful, cosmic last resort. In other words, Hecht's speaker is essentially saying, she's brought down there, and the speaker in Arnold's poem is saying, we're all going to die, and life's crap. But, we can have a good night. And the speaker said, but you shouldn't judge her by that. I mean, she's all right. I see her once in a while. She treats me right. In other words, she puts out. We have sex. We have a drink. I give her a good time. Perhaps it's a year and I see her again. There she is, running to fat. That is, getting fat. Why? Because the implication is years and years and years are going by, but dependable as they come. In other words, she's a friend with benefits. And what's he do? Sometimes I bring her a bottle of Nuit d'Amour. Night of Love. It's a French perfume. So while they're in their bed, looking out of the coast of France, we get together every now and then. Okay, go from there, last one, to 853. We can finish this in 7 minutes. Wilfred Owen, notice his dates, 1893, 1918. He died in the First World War. Okay? He was 25. His poetry was discovered upon his death. He was a member of what was called the Lost Generation. An entire generation of young men of England who were killed in the First World War. That's why it was called the Great War. The war to end all wars, because so many men died. You cannot go to a town in England, any town of any size, and not see a war memorial to the war dead from World War I. Okay? Bent double, like old beggars under sacks, knock-kneed, coughing like hags, we cursed through sludge, till on the haunting flares we turned our backs, and towards our distant rest began to trudge. These are guys in the French fields, in Flanders fields, if you want. Men marched asleep. Historically true. Imagine that. So tired of marching that you're asleep and your body still continues going through it. Many had lost their boots, but limped on bloodshod. All went lame, all blind. Why? Because being asleep, not meaning all literally blind. Drunk with fatigue, deaf even to the hoots of gas shells dropping softly behind. Okay? Because they don't explode like regular ordnance do. Gas. Gas! Notice, deaf and oblivious, and then they realize that's gas. Why is that important? How's mustard seed kill? Or mustard gas kill? It liquefies your lungs. So, it doesn't take much breathing it in for it to start working. So what do? Quick, boys! An ecstasy of fumbling, fitting the clumsy helmets just in time. But someone still was yelling out and stumbling and floundering like a man in fire or lime. What's lime? It's an acid. If you've ever, worked on a car or something and got hydrochloric acid, a little bit of battery acid on, it burns. If you've ever jumped a car, one car battery to another car battery, and had one of those batteries explode, had that pleasure once, you get it all over you. One of my favorite sweatshirts I ever had. Literally within minutes. Riddled like Swiss cheese. An ecstasy of fumbling, but someone still was yelling out and stumbling and floundering like a man in fire and lime. Dim through the misty panes and thick green light as under a green sea, I saw him drowning. Why green? It's the color of the glass on the gas mask, and it's the color of the gas. In all my dreams, before my helpless sight, he plunges at me, guttering, choking, drowning. When this speaker sleeps and dreams, that's what he sees. If in some smothering dreams, you too could pace behind the wagon that we flung him in. Wagon, horse-drawn. Okay? Why did they fling him in? Why didn't they gently lay him? Not quite.
Is this just another death?
Close. He wasn't dead yet.
They're trying to get him.
But he was going to die. That's the thing. It's inevitable. He was going to. They fling him because they've got to move. Okay, so flinging him might have been a little uncourteous, but the guy was a walking dead man. Wasn't walking by this time. And watch the white eyes writhing in his face, his hanging face, like a devil's sick of sin. When does a devil get sick of sin? A devil, a demon. Demons, quote unquote, live for sin. That's their job description. But can they get full of that? If you could hear, notice how this final stanza begins with if. If you could pace behind the wagon, if you could hear at every jolt the blood come gargling from the froth-corrupted lungs, you hear it. Why? Because that's the sound of the blood mixing as he's trying to breathe. Bitter as the cud, obscene as cancer, of vile, incurable sores on innocent tongues. Vile, incurable sores on innocent tongues. The sores produced by the gas. But he's implying a different kind of sore. It's going to come up in just a second. My friend. So if, my friend, you would not tell with such high zest the children ardent for some desperate glory the old lie. Doce et decorum est per patria mori. It is beautiful and fitting to die for one's country. That's the old lie. Is the speaker saying that it's not right to die for one's country? No, he's not. It's not patriotic? No, he's not. What's he saying? It can be those. But it ain't beautiful. And it ain't fitting. That's what the speaker is saying. You know, we just had 3 guys killed in Afghanistan last week. We've been there 17 freaking years. Why are we still there? I mean, Owen would have a real problem with that. I mean, I understood. I was a big all supporter of, the routing out the Taliban. We've essentially made peace with the Taliban. We are going to leave at some point, and guess what? They're going to run the country. Okay? The old saying comes from Roman, comes from Horace. It is sweet and fitting to die for one's country. Oh, it is saying, don't tell that lie to children who are what? Ardent for some distant glory. The words, Doce et decorum est pro patria mori, those are the innocent sores, or the sores on innocent tongues. All right, we'll stop there. So, no class on Wednesday. And I will, like I said, I will post